Hello, everybody. Welcome to Respawn Aimfire. This is a RAF Reviews, very special one. This episode, we will be talking about Citizen Sleeper 2, a potential indie game of the year already in January. Who knows? We'll talk about it. I want to thank fellow traveler for the chance to review the game early. Appreciate that lead time. I've never had one as big. I appreciate it a lot. But I'm not reviewing this game alone today. I have a very special friend. They're pretty great. I'm shocked we haven't done anything before this point. It's Matt Storm. Hey, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on? I mean, technically, you did a side quest on Baldur's Gate 3.
That's
a pretty
true.
beefy one. And that was our first collab. But yeah, I mean, we've been chatting for a long time. And I feel like was it PAX West that we lost each other, or PAX East? I can't remember.
I was at West. So yeah, West was last
You were
time
at
we
West,
saw
so
each
it's
other.
West. We were like, oh, we should actually do stuff together. And you're like, yeah. And then, you know how it goes. Like, we get months busy and like just, but yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I'm a big fan of Respawn Aimfire. I'm glad that Jacob connected us all those years ago. And it's been a blast to hang. And now I'm glad to officially be on the show doing the thing.
Love it. You want to give your plugs because you do, I don't know, 18 podcasts. So I want you to give you a chance to do it.
You know what? You, Dave Jackson, Jacob all like to make that joke, but y'all have enough stuff you're doing also at this point. And I only do like 2 podcasts now. I mean, to be fair, I didn't want the Game Informer show to end last year. GameStop did that, and so that's heartbreaking. But yes, boo. But yeah, I do a bunch of stuff. I've been a DJ for over 10 years and a podcaster for over 10 years. I currently host 2 podcasts. One is the Fun and Games podcast, which I do with the incredible Jeff Moonen, who you've had the pleasure of meeting, my co-host. And the main show is topic-based. We interview developers, composers, other creators, musicians. We'll do topics like signposting in gaming, is grinding overrated, genre retrospectives on like Castlevania, Sonic the Hedgehog. We've done console retrospectives like on the Game Boy Advance and the classic Game Boy and the GameCube and PlayStation. And like we just it's always like an hour-long show that's broadly topic-based on a range of stuff. We've been doing that for a while. And then also within that feed, we have a smaller show that I mentioned earlier you've been a part of called Side Quest, which is a different host every episode talking about a game they love and why they love it. It's a judgment-free zone. It's just someone monologuing about why they love a game. It was born out of how much I hate how the internet just hates things for no reason. And I wanted to put a positive light on the gaming sphere and let people just enjoy things, which is a wild concept. And so that's been a fun series. We're at, as of recording, 353 episodes, which is wild to say out loud. I've been doing it for quite some time, and that's a blast. And then quickly, the other show I do is called Reignite. Started as a Mass Effect podcast. Me and my co-host, Frankie Bradley Lestrange, were obsessed with Mass Effect and wanted to play through the original trilogy, but with the tweak that we'd make decisions as if we were Commander Shepard, and then discuss why we made those choices, and more importantly, why we romance the aliens we romance, the thing that everybody cares about in those games. It was a blast. Ended up deciding to do Andromeda because I had never played it, and so I played it for the first time for the show, while my co-host shepherded me through that game because I had never played it before, which was a lot of fun. And so then the natural evolution is to turn it into a BioWare podcast, and now we are playing through Dragon Age. We've done Origins and Awakening. We are now currently playing our way through Dragon Age 2, and for the first time in the history of the show, current, because BioWare just released the Veilguard, which is the 4th installment in Dragon Age, which we will eventually get to. And we also, at some point this year, plan to do like a broader kind of roundtable discussion with a few guests to just talk broadly about what we loved about the game before we do a deep dive in a few seasons. And yeah, I've been podcasting for 12 years now, which makes me feel really old. And I love doing it. And I used to do a bunch of other shows. There's other stuff you can find me on the internet, but those are the 2 main. And yeah, if you want to go check them out, you can go to djstormageddon.com. That's where all that stuff lives, and would love for you to check it out.
Yeah, very good show. Listen to all of them. I believe the idea for us was to do the original Xbox retrospective on
Correct,
Fun
yes.
and Games. So at some point,
yeah,
maybe.
You are at the top of my list. So how we've done it, for those who haven't listened yet, is we were just choosing them, but then after the first couple, Jeff and I, since we have a Patreon, also had decided, well, why don't we want to do every console eventually anyway, except like maybe the 3DO because I know nothing about the 3DO. Although I know plenty of people who do know a lot about the 3DO, so it could still happen. But we figured let's just pick 4 consoles, do a poll, and let folks choose, and then we'll do the one that gets chosen. So eventually the original Xbox, the behemoth, will end up in that rotation. And yes, you have that earmarked for when we do eventually, when that does win by vote. Which I know you're in there voting for consoles, so eventually you'll have your shot. But once we do, yes, you have the honored third chair for that episode when it eventually happens.
Oh yeah, talking all about Jade Empire, but we're not talking about Jade Empire today. We are talking about Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. Great name. Really quickly from the Steam description, a dice-driven RPG in a human and heartfelt sci-fi world. You are an escaped android with a malfunctioning body, a price on your head, and no memory of your past. Get a ship, find a crew, and take on contracts while you navigate across the Starward Belt. It's developed by Jump Over the Age, published by Fellow Traveler, and just top end thoughts on Citizen. Okay, this is an interesting thing because again, we both got this game for review. That's why we're here at
Yes.
Embargo. We've been talking about it all over the place. If you are checking out what we're doing today when this thing comes out, so I guess what are your top level thoughts and like what is your history with Citizen Sleeper? I guess we'll put this all on this one big bucket right here.
Sure, yeah. So I was lucky enough to. So I guess my history of Citizen Sleeper starts with the legendary RPG nerd Eric Van Allen talking about it in a mutual group chat. He was really into it. I said, Matt, I know you like TTRPGs. Check this out. Watched the trailer and went, I need this game yesterday. And watched as it was getting ready to come out. And when it came out, this was 2022. So we were still the tail end of the pandemic. Some might argue the pandemic's still happening because, COVID's not gone, but neither here nor there. But um around that time, Jeff and I as a podcast were starting to get more codes, go to conventions again, get access to meeting developers, composers, and other folks. And so the Fellow Traveler and their PR company Double Jump were like, they did some outreach like, oh hey, if you want to check out Citizen Sleeper 2, if you want a review code, reach out. We'd love to get folks talking about the game. And so Jeff and I reached out and said, hey, we'd love to check out the game and chat with Gareth, Damian Martin. They solo dev'd the game. Would that be possible? And it was great. And so we got a review code for the game. And Fun and Games, I don't remember what episode number it is, I'll look it up later, but we got to interview Gareth, Damian Martin. So we got the game early. I loved it. We interviewed them. They were a great guest, and basically thought it was one of the best RPGs I've ever played, and also became quite obsessed with Gareth, Damian Martin as a creator. They have another game called In Other Waters, which is also a minimalist kind of exploration game, which I've played and I really liked. I still need to finish. And was like, all right, well, this is probably one of my favorite games ever, and I got it, and that's great. It seemed like it was going to be a one-off thing, and that was that. And then, like a year later, I think they announced, like a year and a half later, not very long after, they announced that there was going to be a sequel, and I lost my damn mind. I just didn't think we'd get one, and for sure not so soon, because it's only been about 2.5 years, I think, since the last game. And so that's kind of wild to me that I got it so soon. And so I was very excited for this. Double Jump, of course, as you said, was gracious enough to give me a review code. Might have there's going to be a written review that you can find if you're already hearing this, and maybe additional stuff that Jeff is working on that's still kind of being figured out. But top level thoughts is I love this game. It's like, not to spoil the ending, but it's my game of the year already. It's only January, so that's not that hard, but like, it's going to be hard to beat. This is my Hi-Fi Rush from a few years ago, which only got dethroned by Alan Wake 2 at like the end of that year. But Hi-Fi Rush, that whole year was my game of the year when it came out in January. And this is, I think, going to be the same thing. Like, I loved it. I thought it was great. I think the way they expanded everything was really well done. I will say, and you know this because you and I have chatted a little offline before this, I didn't love it immediately. I had some issues with it. I ran into some conflict with how it was designed, the new additions, and how it felt. And when we get into the broader discussion, I think we can get into that. But like, I've come around on it, and I think it's probably one of the best. It's hands down easily the best written RPG I've ever played. Full stop. I think.
Yeah, a lot of that is echoed by me. I played the first one. Again, it was a thing where it was like, it was on Game Pass, and I heard a couple of people talk about it. Like, sure, let me try out that one. And also, big TTRPG guy, so I was like, yeah, anything with dice in it, sure, I'll give this a check. And that when that game came out, again, 2022, I don't remember. I have an exact list. It's recorded somewhere, but that was my number one indie game, I'm pretty sure. And then I think like 2 or 3 overall. And that came out of nowhere because I didn't know anything about it. Played it, fell in love with it. The characters, the dice mechanic was just enough gameplay to get me pushed through the story because it's a very heavy visual novel, which I normally do not like. But this one, the first one hit with me. And Citizen Sleeper 2, I think is just the first game but better because the gameplay mechanics are there's a word I've been using is desperation is what the gameplay feels like at times, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's actually good and makes it. I'll get into it in a second, but I prefer the gameplay of this. And then it's like, oh yes, more good writing, more good characters, more good story. Like I don't see any issues. Yeah, I love this game. It's great. Again, yes, it's January, but like how the first one, if the first one was on the top of my game of the year list when the year came out, and this one is better, what does that say about this game being on my game of the year list? You know, so I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think it's excellent. And then anybody, if you haven't played the first one, definitely check that out. But I think they're both wonderful, and I think this one's just a little bit better for me personally. So that's we're reviewing the second one. I think the second one's very good. So since me and you have talked about it on podcasts and you write, and we've talked about this game in different places a lot, like us, by the time you're hearing this. So I literally hear in my notes, get into anything you want to talk about, all capital, let loose. Because there's a thing like you hit the same points. I'm like, just go crazy. I want to start with one thing, sort of talking about what you were talking about with how you
Yeah.
didn't like the gameplay at the beginning, but it eventually turned and you liked it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I was playing it again. This game was much harder than the first one initially
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, these dice rolls actually matter, and you feel like you can fail a lot. I even restarted the first 30 minutes of the game because I was like, something bad happened, and I was like, I don't want that to. I could have let it ride, but I'm like, I don't want that to be canon. I'm redoing this whole thing,
Right.
and then I went through the game, and then there's still tough times, but I overcame, and it felt good. To me, it's not exactly a 1-to-1, but the way that I feel about Red Dead Redemption 2 is the way I feel about this game. Where Red Dead can be, I don't think so, but some people are like, oh, game's too slow or whatever. But for me, it's like the slowness and like making you sit in the game world makes the payoffs even better. Like, I don't love any character more in gaming than I do Arthur Morgan, point blank period, because I had that entire journey with him and I saw everything that
Right.
happened to him and all his friends. Arthur's my guy, right? This game
Right.
too, it's like at the beginning, it's like, man, this is like too tough. I'm getting glitched dice. My dice are breaking. Like, what is going on? But when you push through that, and by the end of it, I'm like, this was part of the journey. I get it. I'm kind of here. So just like I had to earn it in Red Dead 2, I earned it in Citizen Sleeper 2, even though I restarted the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like I feel like that's the point in it, and it felt good by the end. So I just want to get that off my chest because I haven't said that anywhere.
Yeah. No, and I get that. And I think, in a similar way to like Mass Effect 3, while the ending is divisive, I think the ending is divisive because those 3 games you've gone through so much with Commander Shepard and many of those characters, Tali, Garrus, Caden or Ashley, they've been around since the first game and the choices mattered. The impact hits so much harder. And this game condenses that experience pretty quick in making you care about the characters. And so I guess some framework, the story in the first Citizen Sleeper is a little different in the sense that it's kind of piecemeal. You wake up in this strange place. You're given a home by a kindly old man who puts you to work. You start to make some money, explore the space station, and kind of understand the space, slowly make friends, and then kind of pick a path. And you follow that path to the end, and and it has multiple endings, and that's how you finish that game. This game starts with you waking up, your sleeper waking up from a failed reboot attempt, your co-pilot Seraphin rushing you out, and you being chased by Lene. I think there's no voices in this game,
Yeah,
so
a
I
lot
never
of
know.
but
But
me and Jacob talked about it, like I don't know how to say any of these names properly.
um, but you're being chased by this guy Lene who had captured you, and you're trying to escape, and you're on the run basically the whole game. But this game has a narrative through line of you and your co-pilot trying to gather a crew to survive. And you were trying to survive in the first game and you were hunted in the first game, but it was a different thing. This is so in another podcast that you'll hear me on elsewhere, Jacob McCourt compares it to Mass Effect 2 in the sense that and I think he's right, gathering the crew for the suicide mission. This is it's not the suicide mission, but you are gathering a crew to explore the galaxy and survive. And I think that is why the mechanics matter so much more. The mechanics were great in the first one, and there was difficulty, but this one starts off with you choosing a difficulty, which you can adjust later as well, and I did. But the funny thing is, as you start to talk to more people, you find out, like, at one point, all my dice were broken because they can break and degrade. I had no money, I had no fuel, I had no supplies, I was starving, and that happens like 2 or 3 more times to me throughout that playthrough. And when it happened the first time, Jacob was like, "Yeah, well, that's the first time. Wait till it happens the second time or the third time." And I got frustrated because this game puts you in a position that you have to lose. And what I think is brilliant about it now is the narrative feels desperate, like you said, and the mechanics back that up. And once I got to that breaking point in the story and failed that mission, there's still results. You fail missions like this in like Baldur's Gate 3, right? When you fail in Baldur's Gate 3, the game doesn't end, you don't get a game over. A path closes off and another path opens. You just get diverted. The story changes. This game is the same. You never truly fail, although I think you can die, sort of. But the story just diverts. Things don't come to fruition, and then you do other things. And I think that even main story stuff, if you fail, the outcome is just different. It's not that you don't get an outcome. And once I realized that about halfway through the game, I came back around on the harder mechanics. Also, I switched it to easy for a while, which like let me get my brain back behind it, and then boosted it back up to normal for the tail end of the game, which it lets you do on the fly. And I then came to love the game even more than the first game because I've never seen such a brilliant integration of desperation mechanically and narratively like I have in this game. Like I felt the kind of pressure that I think a lot of other Dark Souls players get playing those kinds of games that I got a little from Elden Ring, but it felt more frustrating than narrative. Whereas here, it felt so interwoven, it was kind of flawless.
Yeah, the first time that it's similar to the first game. I believe this is the first game. I haven't played it in a little bit, but like getting the stress right. So you make
Right.
rolls based on your dice. You can get like 100% positive and neutral, a little mix of all three, and then the last one being a failure, right?
Right.
And as you gain more stress, like your dice break down, but you gain stress by failing rolls. There was a specific mission where, God, and you were talking about, they make it feel so good, where I was isolated in a place I was not supposed to be. My stress was built all the way up. Nobody could help me, and I was just wait. I was like, I guess I'm gonna die. I was waiting to die, and then
Yeah.
there's, based on the difficulty I was playing, I had something bad happen to me, but I didn't die. Like it's like, oh, things
Right.
continue, but it didn't feel desperate. I felt like I was lost. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is done. This is over with. And then that thing happened to me, and then that cool moment, and then a character shows up immediately afterwards, which was going to show up anyways. But the timing for me felt like, oh, I get it. This is
Yeah.
great. And again, I was already enjoying it, but to actually fail and be like actually worried, my body was like, oh no, this is not good. You don't want this. And for that
Yeah.
to all come around and pay off in such a way, and then, I mean, I don't want to spoil too. We can spoil because this is a review, but I don't want to do too much. But it's basically when you go to Darktide for that first time,
Yeah.
and then you meet one of the characters from the first game. When that character
Yeah.
came to find me, that's right after I had quote unquote died that first time. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, it's nice to see a familiar face. I think hopefully this isn't the worst thing ever. But it was kind of a nice mix of like, yeah, like you were saying, the mechanic and the narrative all coming together at that perfect moment where like failure didn't feel bad, but I also like gives me the drive to go on and finish the fight in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the writing. I mean, look, I like to read. I'm not a strong book reader. I prefer audiobooks just because I have trouble focusing on that. But there's something about how this game is designed and presented and written that I am always engaged. And even in visual novels that I love, like Boyfriend Dungeon and a bunch of others, I tend to drift sometimes while reading. It's just, and if stuff isn't fully voiced, which a lot of Boyfriend Dungeon is, but not all of it, this game has no voice acting whatsoever, has great sound effects, and like, also, I should say Amos Roddy, who did the soundtrack for the first game and this game and In Other Waters, has pretty much worked on all of Gareth's games. It's some of the best music in video games because even though it's a lot of synth soundscapes and sweeping sounds and like hopeful and sometimes desperate, it frames the narrative so well and also fits so well that when the music shifts, based on what's happening, it always feels right. It never feels like we're jumping to a new track or it's an awkward transition. It's all perfectly scored. While writing my review and the lead up to this week, I've been listening to because the sequel soundtrack is not on Spotify yet. Only a couple tracks are, but the first soundtrack, the whole thing is on there, and I've just been listening to it on loop, and it's so engaging for something that is heavy of a very specific like sci-fi synthy theme. It still feels diverse and really engaging. And this game's music is, I think, even better. And I think that also helps frame it really well. But the characters are so well written that I just want to keep finding out what happens. And yeah, sometimes the descriptive text I'll drift on, but for the most part, like I'm completely locked in on this game. And it's the music, it's the writing, and it's also the character portraits. It's a lot of like in a visual novel, a lot of still images. There are variety in this game. The characters have multiple images to represent them, especially Seraphin, who's your co-pilot, because he is the through line of the game. But like they look incredible, and they looked incredible in the first game, but I think they even stepped it up. I think it's the same designer, stepped it up in this game. Feels really approachable, and they basically leap off the screen. They're so well detailed.
Yeah, agree. I mean, that's why we're saying it's such a good game. Every aspect of the game is wonderful. A fun one I want to kind of want to talk about, because you kind of touched on it, characters. Because you have some returns, you have some new people here. How do you feel about these characters? Who's your favorite? Who do you hate the most? I don't know, whatever it is. I, I, mm, I don't want to. So here's the thing. I don't know if we both have the same one. A lot of people have
Uh-huh.
been saying Bliss, and I adore Bliss. But I'm like, that feels like an easy answer because they're in the first game. But
Yeah,
on the other hand, every time I went on a mission, Bliss was with me. So I don't,
yeah,
I can't really talk too much crap and try to say it's an
yeah,
easy answer because it was my answer. Again, most of the crew is basically wonderful in it. Similar to
yeah,
Mass Effect, where they have like a cool, not necessarily a loyalty mission, but like here's a thing that they're driving towards,
yeah,
and you help them with that. But Bliss was a big one for me, and Junie. I like Junie a lot as well. What
yeah,
about you?
yeah. I mean, Bliss, like I freaked out when I saw them again. Also, important to point out, they them pronouns, not they them pronouns in the first game, which is really interesting. Like it shows character growth in a way. I mean, I go by they them pronouns. I didn't always. I went by he him for a long time. And so like to see that kind of personal representation and then it be my favorite character from the first game come back, like that was my ending was the Bliss and other character who I don't want to spoil because we shouldn't reveal all of the returning characters, but like their ending where they leave the station, that was my ending in the first game. So to then see them again in this game as a different sleeper and know that they left together and like because that was my ending was so cool. So yeah, it's easily Bliss. I really like Seraphin. I think he's a great character. He's really kind of got your back. He's like that loyal kind of co-pilot in crime character and is really well done. But I also like Cadet a lot. Is one of the new characters. She's kind of a go-getting kind of like she runs her own shop. It gets destroyed, and you're trying to help her figure out why it happened and kind of figure out how to move on from it. And I think she's really a really strongly written character. Junie also though is very endearing from very early on. I think the characters are in both games written really dynamically, but I think there's something even extra interesting about the characters in this game because they all tie back to the main story like in a way that in the first game you kind of branched off and like met characters and then like endeared to them or became companions with them and kind of went off on your own story. Here it all kind of ties back. I mean, I'm not going to spoil any of it, but Seraphin's main storyline and the people you meet and how you find out about his past and how it comes back in the story is really great. I really love it. Um, so yeah, but yeah, Bliss is easily my favorite character. Been hesitant to like I didn't even mention Bliss in my review. I did mention certain characters return, but I did post I mean Bliss they are featured in the one of the trailers, so it's not a total surprise that they're back. But still I didn't want to ruin that for anyone because it's always like I somehow missed that characters were going to come back, and so I was so genuinely surprised when I saw the handful that do come back. But that doesn't take anything away from the new characters, who I think are great as well.
Yeah, especially you were talking about they all tie into the narrative. I do like how this narrative in this game is so again, the first game is takes place on one space station. And the thing I love about this game, it's like you got a ship and let's get a crew together. You do that
Yeah,
in anything, I'm here for it. So I do like how again all of their things tie into the main narrative. Like the idea of being on this ship and we need to make money so that we can keep the ship moving and keep everybody alive is such a central part of the main part of the story. But then it's like, okay, well, we got this problem to fix. We got to go over to this scrap or this star yard over here. And it's like, oh, now we made a character that maybe got referenced earlier, somebody new here. And then all of it ties so well together. And the game is smartly pushing you forward and not letting you stay in one place for too long so you can experience everything. And then near the end is like, okay, go out, where everything is, do what you need to do so we can go, finish the story basically. So I like how all the characters in the main plot are pushing you through the game in a fun way. And just like, it's good design. It's crazy. It's just good design and good characters, good music. It's like good video games come out of that or something.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here? I'll do one thing. The setting.
Mm-hmm.
I love, again, sci-fi, big fan of.
Yep.
Just in general. And the idea of this world being, okay, so like space travel's a thing, and people kind of went out to settle, but you're living in the remnants of like when the corporations like don't really care anymore. And it's like these are the desperate people who are just left behind. And all your characters have stories that tie into that. Like some people are like looking for a way out. Like one entire character's entire backstory is like, I'm just looking for a way out. I don't want to be here anymore. Yep. So I like the whole, corporations are bad. That's always fun to put in a game because it's always true.
It's true.
But then the whole, like, everyone is stuck here and just like hope is the only thing we have and we got to try to survive together. Also, the idea, if you haven't played the first one and you're this far in the review, a sleeper is a synthetic body, something, like an android body, that a person will sell a copy of their consciousness to a corporation for money. So basically it's like, hey, I need $20,000 to buy a new car. Hey, corporation, have my consciousness so you can make a workforce that's robots. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever explained, but my idea is like, okay, well, we need AI, like a thinking machine to run our workforce. So let's just get people instead of like making AI because that's easier or something. So you're a copy of a person, but you don't have all of their memories. But then are you your own person since you are technically conscious? And it's always a fun like sci-fi thing to do. It's like, is this a living entity because it has everything else that a normal human would, so what makes them different than a human, which is always fun to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. The story in both games, the sleeper can either kind of lean into like I sort of remember who I was and I don't want to forget that person, or I'm my own person. They sold they sold off their mind, and so it's mine now. It's not theirs. I am myself, and yeah, it's identity politics, gender related politics, all of that fun stuff that's I think really interesting and worth discussing. And it really is fascinating how they frame it. I'm a sucker for a sci-fi story also. I like fantasy as well, but like sci-fi will always be my preference between the two. I've always enjoyed it more. But it is, and yeah, corporations are bad. Always a good storyline because again, always true. Just like punching a Nazi, always a good thing, right? Like these are just universal truths in video games and in life, for no specific reason at this moment. And so, yeah, I think they do it well here, and they do it even better in the sequel, I think, because I think you meet other sleepers in the first game, but none that really stand out. But there is a prominent new character in this who is also a sleeper that you encounter in the back half of the game, and like you are on easy at each other because no sleepers aren't even the same because the different consciences, that's a word, and like the different life experiences completely shape them differently, even if they look the same, like mechanically, even if they're built to look similarly. And I think that's also fascinating, and how they approach it with those characters in the game is done really well.
Yeah, agree. It's very, very good. Man, I'm just having thoughts in my head about like the parallels of that whole idea. I was like, oh, that's because I was watching a movie. I'll talk about it after we're done. It's like, oh, that's just talking about generational trauma and like you're getting the thing from your dad that was not good. Anyways,
Yeah.
you could think about AI like that if you want to. So again, is there anything last you want to talk about before we give our final verdict on if we recommend this video game or not?
I mean, I feel like we left stuff out, but I guess that's the benefit of reading and watching multiple things. There's a class system in this, like in the first game. Also, we forgot to mention I played the it's not enforcer, it's something else, but the one that's endurance based.
Yeah, I played the big boy, whatever. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the class name is. I say big boy.
In the first game, I played the engineer-based class. This game has a little more complex skill tree, and also like a push mechanic that allows you to activate an ability, which I forgot to use for half the game. Because it wasn't in the first game, and there's nothing on screen reminding you really to use it. The tutorialization is bare in the best way, like it shows you the basics, but you are really left to discover how to best use your tools together. It doesn't even really tell you what the different like quote unquote loot you can get is, like the different ship parts and other things and what they're for. Eventually you find out, but like it's not clearly spelled out for you because they want you to kind of figure it out as you go. But yeah, I can't really think of anything else off the top of my head, at least.
Yeah, I feel like we cover it, and then I don't. For it to so it took me about 10 hours to beat, and I'm like, I would
Same.
hate to ruin the back 8 hours of that game for anybody who's going to play it. So I'm like, I
Correct.
could go all spoilers, but I'm like, I really just want people to play it, and with that short of a runtime, you should just experience. Know that like here's how the game works, and here's some cool things about it. But I really just think you should play it.
Yeah.
But I guess going, do we recommend it? Like, yeah, 100%. Like, I think, especially, I think you should always support indie developers, but
Yep.
also the availability. It's like it's going to be on it's got PC, PS5, Xbox Series. It's also going to be on Game Pass day one. I'm just like, why would you? Again, if you have the money and extra money to do it absolutely. If you pay for Game Pass and do it on Game Pass. I just think you should play this game if any of it is even slightly interesting, because it's going to be one of the better games of the year. So don't deprive yourself of playing one of the best games of the year.
Yeah. Also, if you have PlayStation Plus, the first game just came onto PlayStation Plus, so you can go play that too to get a taste. And even though it's not the same mechanically, it's similar enough that you can really get a sense of. And the writing, like I said, is just as great in the first one. Yeah, it's same for me. It's a recommend. It's a 10 out of 10 game for me. Like when I was writing my reviews are very structured. I'm like, here's the good, here's the bad, here's my final thoughts. My bad section was like, I guess this thing was bad, but not for me. Like I really didn't have anything to me. It is a perfect video game. It is the perfect sequel because it took what I loved about the first game and made it better, even in ways that I didn't quite understand as I was playing it till I got through it. I can easily recommend this to anyone, except maybe if you don't like to read a lot in a video game, maybe for whatever reason it just doesn't work for you. If you're not a fan of visual novels, even though this isn't a visual novel, it has visual novel elements. There is a ton of reading. It's basically a book, a video game book. And so if that's a struggle for you, you may not be interested. But that said, if you have Game Pass, just try it. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It is a 10 out of 10 video game, and I'm excited. It feels like there's more buzz with the sequel, so I'm hoping even more people will try it because I've been shouting about the first game from the rooftops since it came out, and hopefully. And you can start with this game. I don't think we've said that. Like, you are a different sleeper than in the first game. So, at least as far as I can tell, it's never really kind of explicitly said, but that's the assumption. But the narrative is its own here. The repeat characters are great if you've known them before, but if you don't, they're great on their own anyway. So, if you just want to jump into the sequel, while I typically would say go play the first one, you can absolutely jump into the sequel sight unseen without the first one because it's its own story, it's its own adventure.
Yeah, agree very much. Yeah, everyone go check that out. Matt, thank you very much for coming on. I'm glad we finally got to do some more stuff.
Yeah,
Hopefully more in the future. Yeah, again, just thank you a lot. Is there anything on the way out you want to say or reiterate
I,
or?
I guess if folks want to find me, you can find me at djstormageddon.com on Blue Sky. Yeah, I got that .com on Blue Sky. So you can go check me out there. That's where I'm posting the most these days. And again, if you want to check out what Fun and Games has done around this, I have a written review that'll be out today. And then we also interviewed Gareth Damian Martin back when the first game came out. And it's a great conversation. If you want to go check that out, it's in the Fun and Games feed as well. But thank you for having me. I've wanted to collab with you for a while. I'm sure we'll do it again. Maybe get the whole crew together next time. Instead, they were all cowards today and didn't show up. I don't know what that's about.
Just
But
the worst people.
gotta call them out, right? It's
Yeah.
just it's no fun if you don't. But this was a blast, and it was a pleasure to talk about this game that we both love. And I'll come back anytime.
All right, appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening or watching, and talk to you later.
Bye.